Right, the Egyptian gods and goddesses. Not all of them, because there were several, but just some of the more important ones. So, the basics of the Egyptian religion. They were polytheists, so they practiced polytheism. That's the belief in many gods and goddesses. Poly means many, and then theo comes from God, so many gods. There were actually over 2,000 names of gods in ancient Egypt, which is why I'm not going to have you learn all of the gods of ancient Egypt, but just a handful of them. Some of the images of ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses would have them with a human body and then a head of some sort of bird or animal, as they were believed to be mixed, because animals were chosen to represent the powers of each god. So, the importance of the gods. Religion was very important to the Egyptians. Uh, Basically, they believed that gods and goddesses affected everyday portions of your life. So, if you had a good crop, it was because the gods wanted you to have good crops. If there was flooding or a drought, that's because you angered the gods. So, they believed that everything that happened because the gods wanted it to happen. At first, most gods were animals, and then they later took on human appearances and behaviors. This actually made it more acceptable for the Egyptians because it was hard to relate to a bird that ruled over everything. But if it looked more like you as a person, it became more acceptable and understandable. So this is Thoth, and that would have been the god of learning and wisdom. And he carries this scepter that symbolizes wisdom and his power. So here's the first important god for you to learn is, I believe it's pronounced Bastet, and that is the goddess of protection, of joy, love, pleasure, and pregnant women. So it is a sacred cat that is incarnated as this goddess. And she's a loving goddess who likes music and dance. Many people think she's the daughter of the sun god Ra. And if you remember from previous lessons, the son of the sun god Ra was supposed to be the pharaoh. So this would have been like Pharaoh's sister in theory. Um, but she's basically in charge of making sure that love and joy are everywhere and looking out for pregnant women. The next one is Anubis. This is the god of mummification, and he guides the dead into the next life through Osiris. So Osiris rules the underworld, and Anubis would gather, I guess it'd be your soul, is how they imagined it, but would gather your soul and take you to the underworld through Osiris. And he's also the one that looks after the mummification process, making sure that everything goes smoothly. And he is the guardian to Necropolis. The priests, when they were doing the mummification ceremonies, would often wear this mask, which is the head of a jackal, to represent Anubis, so that they were honoring him while they prepared the bodies. Ra, this is the god of the sun, and he was considered the most important god to all of Egyptians because the sun controls everything, the light, the crops, whatever it might be. He is lord of all of the other gods. All the other gods have to answer to him in Egyptian religion. So he's usually shown in human form with a falcon's head, and then he has a sun disk and a cobra on top of his head. And it's believed he sailed across the heavens in this boat called the Bark of a Million of Years. And so his boat basically carries the sun across the heavens each day. At the end of each day, they say that Ra dies and he sails his night voyage through the underworld and lets the moon light everything. And then he comes back the next day again. Horus is the god of the sky. He's the son of Ra, and that's who they believe their pharaoh was, that he was the living incarnation of Horus. And then Egyptians had myths to explain events that they couldn't understand. So if there was flooding, they would have to explain that. Or how the world was created, they needed to explain that. If, say, let's say there was an eclipse. That's something that all of you have experienced fairly recently and probably remember. But at this time, that would have been terrifying for people because they didn't understand the science behind it. So they would have had a myth to answer why that is. And so I have this link here. You can check it out on your own, but I will also bring it up right here. And this is the creation myth. It says, at first there was only none. None was the dark waters of chaos. One day a hill rose up out of the waters. This hill was called Benben. On this hill stood Atum, the first god. Atum coughed and spat out Shu, the god of air, and Tufnut, the goddess of moisture. Shu and Tufnut had 2 children. First there was Geb, the god of the earth. Then there was Nut, the goddess of the sky. Shu lifted Nut up so that she became a canopy over Geb. Nut and Geb had 4 children named Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. Osiris was the king of the earth, and Isis was the queen. Osiris was a good king, and he ruled over the earth for many years. However, everything was not well. Seth was jealous of Osiris because he wanted to be the ruler of the earth. He grew angrier and angrier until one day he killed Osiris. Osiris went down into the underworld, and Seth remained on earth and became king. Osiris and Isis had one son called Horus. Horus battled against Seth and regained the throne. After that, Horus was the king of the earth, and Osiris was the king of the underworld. So this is a myth meant to explain how Pharaoh got to be on earth and why Osiris rules the underworld. And that is what you will need to know for our class purposes